We welcome all the panelists for this next session called Frozen Moments. And I must say that it was really kind of Shri SVL Narayan. We had a small issue that the chair, who was Shri Bharat Bala, had some issues and could not make it. So he called us yesterday to tell us, and he was terribly sorry for this. And so the app person that I could think of was Shri SVL Narayan for this, to be the chair for this session. And Shri SVL Narayan is a marketing consultant and brand evangelist. During SVL's career spanning over 35 years, his experience encompassed a panoramic perspective of strategic business processes across industries, information technology, FMCG, automotive, and industrial products. He has also been involved in the listing of 2 companies on International Stock Exchange. He has a degree in mechanical engineering and is a fellow of the Institution of Engineers. I'm sure now you're wondering what made me invite him. What made me invite him to be a chair here is that he is an author, he has authored a book, and he is a writer too. He writes regularly for the newspaper, and his interests vary from anything to everything. So, sir, I will hand over the session to you, and you can take it forward.
Thank you, Srimati Jayakumar, for inviting me for this program. And of course, thank you, Aparna Sridhar, also for all your inputs. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege for me to be moderating this program this evening. It is amazing how technology has provided us a platform to listen to a scintillating talk from 4 scholars who are shown in their respective areas of specialization. In fact, when you hear the profile of each one of the speakers today, you will be highly impressed. The program titled Frozen Moments is very apt to describe the presentations that you will see in the next couple of hours, because each of these scholars will be presenting to you selected works that to them capture the essence of their art in an unforgettable image. The 4 speakers today are drawn from 4 different aspects of art. James Godber is a natural environment photographer. Christian Vietri specializes in sculpture. Pieter Welteverde is a painter and illustrator. And Srikumar is an architect. In fact, Pieter rang me in the morning to explain to me how exactly I should pronounce his name. And Christian also sent me a recording of how to pronounce his name. That's the kind of involvement that they've had in this program. What is common among all of them is a deep and abiding interest in India, whether it be culture, philosophy, beliefs, yoga, environment, and architecture. Without much ado, let me not keep you all the intellectual and cultural feast that you're about to experience. I'll be introducing each speaker by turn and give a brief on their presentation. I'll begin with Mr. James Godber. I'll get to the next speaker, who is Mr. Christian Vietri. Christian Vietri is an artist based in New York. His art education took place at the National School of Fine Arts in Paris, where he completed a Bachelor of Fine Art, and then Columbia University in New York City, where he completed a Master of Fine Art. His artwork is informed by rigorous training in bionic science and technology and the study and practice of Kashmir Shaivism. His sculptures have been exhibited and collected internationally for the past 20 years, and he has been the recipient of several awards, including Citizen of the Year for his contribution to visual art in Australia. Christian will be speaking about the Mahasiddha Matsyendranath and the sculpture he created in his honor. So Christian will be speaking specifically about the sculpture he created for the great 10th century yogi named Matsyendranath. He'll explain aspects of his life and mythology and how he gave them form. Christian, like we discussed earlier, after your presentation, would you like to say a few words about the Spanda sculpture you created in Perth, Australia, and is reference to the Kashmir Shaivism? So basically, we are also looking at how Indian culture and any aspect of Indian culture, philosophy, has also spread across the world, thanks to the works of some of these eminent speakers that we're going to have today. ahead, Christian.
Sure, I would be happy to say a few words about this Spanda sculpture as well. Yes. Thank you very much for your invitation here, Aparna and Vijaya Lakshmi. Thank you. Did you want me to add anything else, Shri Narayan?
You can start your presentation, Christian.
Oh, okay. So I'm first up, am I?
Yeah, sorry, there's been a change in schedule, Chris. Sorry
Yes.
about that.
Okay, no problem. All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. Namaste, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all on this panel. So, as was mentioned, I'm going to be talking about Matsyendranath, the Mahasiddha, and the sculpture which I created in his honor. So when I started to learn about the life and the teachings of Matsyendranath, I began to realize at once how significant he is in the history of yoga, and at the same time how overlooked he is in contemporary yoga communities. So the reason why I started to create this sculpture, and also the reason for giving this talk, is to bring his life to light, as well as to bring his enlightened nature to life. So I'm speaking from the position of an artist, and I'll be sharing some of the research and the introspection that I went through to capture the essence of this great yogi in sculptural form. So what we know about Matsyendranath is that he lived in Assam sometime between the 7th and the 10th century. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is sort of the root text about Hatha Yoga, he's praised as the very first yogi who taught the knowledge of Hatha Yoga. In the Tantra Loka by Abhinavagupta, he's honored as the father of yoga and also the founder of the Kaula tradition. In an ancient text called the Chaturashiti Siddha Pavriti, we have the story of Matsyendranath actually written, and mythology of Matsyendranath. So I'd like to share that with you now. Matsyendranath was born in eastern India and was a fisherman by caste. At some distance from Kamarupa, there was an ocean where he caught fish and sold them at the local market. One day he caught a very huge fish, and when he tried to draw it out of the ocean, he was not able to. And instead, the fish dragged him deep down into the water. The fish swallowed him whole, but he was protected by his good karma and he did not die. At the very same time, the goddess Shakti was asking Shiva to narrate her lessons of Dharma, to which he answered that his teaching was very secret and not just for anybody. He said, "Make a house deep in the ocean where nobody will listen to us, and I will initiate you there," he told her. The goddess did this, and after they both reached this place at the ocean floor, Shiva started his lesson. While he was speaking, the fish who had swallowed the fisherman swam by and stopped right beneath the underwater house that the goddess and Shiva were sitting in. Shiva had not finished his lesson yet, but the goddess became overpowered by sleep. Shiva, however, continued narrating, and he asked the goddess if she was following his teachings. And it was in fact the fisherman who, listening from the stomach of the fish, answered, "Yes, I understand." So when Shiva completed his teaching, the goddess awakened and confessed, "I was listening up until some moment, but then I fell asleep." And puzzled, Shiva asked her, "Then who was it that said that I understood?" Shiva then saw that it was the man who was inside the fish who had heard the whole teaching. And since he had heard this whole teaching, Shiva initiated him and ordered him to do his practice inside the fish for 12 years. One day, another fisherman caught that big fish and dragged it out of the water. Seeing its unusual heaviness, they thought it might have gold or silver in its stomach. They took it out of the water, cut open its belly, and saw a man sitting there inside. And shocked, the fisherman asked the man who he was. The fisherman asked the man who he was, and the man answered, "I was a fisherman like you. This fish dragged me into the ocean and swallowed me whole for 12 years. Everyone was greatly astonished to see this event. And from that moment, he became famous and known as Matsyendranath, Lord of the Fishes. And people praised him, and immediately he started dancing. As he danced, his feet entered deep into the earth, as if it were wet, and he sang, 'Because of previously accumulated good karma and the power of chanting the sacred mantra, I have attained realization.' He then spent 500 years performing various deeds to uplift humanity." So this is the mythology, the story of Matsyendranath. And obviously, when we reflect on this story, it's not to be taken literally. This man did not actually live inside a fish for 12 years. This is mythology, and it points to some deep truth. And there are different interpretations of this myth. For me, the most compelling interpretation that I've come to is that the fish is the vehicle of spiritual practice, yoga and meditation, that which brings us into the most deepest, most sacred place within ourselves, to the oceanic depths of our own being. And so Matsyendranath, he heard the Lord speak in secret and in a quiet place at the bottom of the ocean. And in this sense, we can understand the myth is demonstrating that when we recede into our inner being, into that secret place, we can hear sacred knowledge. And in Sanskrit, there is a beautiful word for this. It's Shruti, that which is heard by revelation. So Matsyendranath was in that fish for 12 years. So it's also a beautiful illustration of what's humanly possible if we want to commit ourselves to spiritual practice for an extended period of time. So I would like to show some images. I'll continue talking about them, but I'll bring up some images of the sculpture and we can discuss. I guess I can screen share, right? Yeah. Just bear with me one moment. Okay, you can all see that? I hope. Or not?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we can see it
Okay.
clearly.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so during my research, I studied many different representations of Matsyendranath, and there are many throughout history in different traditions, to get a sense of how he's been traditionally portrayed. This ecstatic dance posture that you can see here is characteristic of Mahasiddha representations throughout history. It's a way of showing their unity with the force of life and their state of ultimate freedom. So that's a front view. I'll show you another view. And so there is another interpretation, which I like to mention, of the myth of Matsyendranath, and that is that this swallowing into the belly of the fish is at once a macrocosmic map of the subtle body anatomy, as well as an explanation of a very specific yogic practice whereby the downward flow of prana is actually reversed and moves back up the central channel. It requires more explanation. It's quite fascinating. I won't go into it right now, but suffice to say that this posture is referred to as Bhujanga lalitam, the serpent's play. So in this posture, I've attempted to give form to that, to the arising of Kundalini, which is a goal and a potential result of the Hatha Yoga practice, which Matsyendranath taught, and which we practice today too. So you'll see that he's adorned with all the hallmarks of a Shaivat yogi. He has dreadlocks. I'll show you another. He has these dreadlocks. He wears the Rudraksha beads on his body. He has these thick earrings pierced through the concha here, right here, which is characteristic of the Nat lineage. Let me see if we can get a close up. You can see, yeah, a bit difficult to see his earrings in these photos, but he also, you can see in this image, he has the Tripundra, this mark of holy ash from the sacred fire, and that's traced along the forehead like that and along the arms, and it represents the threefold powers of Shiva. And for those who apply the mark, it's a reminder of the spiritual aims in life, the truth that the body and material things will someday just turn to ash, and that liberation in this life is a worthy goal. So representations such as this are important for us to have, not only because we should know about the roots of yoga, where these teachings come from, and where is the authentic lineage, but also as a way to have reflected back to us that which we would like to become. So whatever we look at, whatever we concentrate our awareness on, or whatever we associate with, in that sense, we merge with. If we watch violent movies, we tend to generate violent thoughts. It's really that simple of a mechanism, in a sense. So everything we lay our eyes on signals back to us who we are, and points us in a direction. And so it's vitally important to choose those signals consciously. So the essential function of an artwork like this then is to provide you with an image of your own liberated nature in the form of a being who has attained that level of realization, such that it mirrors back to you your own highest self and guides you towards that potential. So thank you so much for your time and your attention. It's a real pleasure to talk about this Matsyendranath and the sculpture, and I hope you've enjoyed getting to know more about Matsyendranath. There's so much more to say. It's such a rich and complex. He's such a rich and complex field, and there's a lot more to say. There's a lot I missed out, but if you're interested in the sculpture, also I'll mention that for your home, for your altar, for your yoga studio, they're made to order in gold-plated bronze. They begin at 20 centimeters high, and you can reach out to me via my website, and they can also be made much larger, so we can discuss that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christian, and that's been a pretty amazing sculpture that you've shown us. Now, coming back to what we discussed about I was highly impressed by the Spanda sculpture that you have put in Perth. And I thought that had a lot of Shaivism in it, Kashmiri Shaivism in that. Would you like to elaborate on your thoughts behind it and what made you select that particular aspect of sculpture?
Sure. Well, I'm very inspired by the teachings of Kashmiri Shaivism, and when I saw that site, I could feel that there was a real potential there to create an icon which would completely open up the sort of the heart of the city. And so this Spanda principle in Kashmir Shaivism is sort of the pulsation of consciousness between the absolute and the relative, and between form and no form. And I thought that was the Spanda. The word Spanda it refers to a vibration. And so I tried to give form to that principle, in a sense, of a vibratory force between the unmanifest and the manifest. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. And then it's coming to one last point. You have lived in Australia, you have lived in the United States, and I'm sure you would have traveled to other parts of the world. What exactly do you think has the spread of Indian philosophy, religious symbols spread across the world thanks to some of the work by artists like you?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Now, you have been living in Australia and the United States, and I'm sure you would have traveled to a lot of other countries. Do you think the Indian philosophy, the religious symbols, and various other aspects of India, have they been spreading across the Western world? And have they had any influence in those countries?
Yes, I see that they are they're very pervasive and becoming more and more so, and especially with the spread of yoga. I mean, this is one way that the teachings are spreading, and I'll add that it's very important in that sense that we trace back the roots and that we're also faithful to the authentic traditions of yoga, because it's fast moving throughout the world for sure. And it's important for us to retain its integrity and be conscious of that.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Christian. We'll be having questions from audience a bit later after all the panelists.
Yes. Please can the speakers speak their bit, and then we can have questions in the end. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Now the next speaker is someone who called me on the phone this morning, and I was a bit surprised because it came as a private number, and not too many people call me from private numbers. So it was Pieter Welteverde, and he started by explaining to me how to pronounce his name because that's what I'd asked him in an email to him. He has a very exciting experience in art. Pieter Welteverde began his artistic studies with Harish Johari in 1977. I'm sure he'll be telling you a little more about his guru a little later. And also studied with Sri Chandrabal. He lives in Holland with his wife and 2 children and travels to India annually. After getting a master's degree in social sciences in the Netherlands, Pieter's meeting with Sri Harish Johari led to a major career change. Johari, a master artist as well as Jnana Yogi, made Pieter his primary art student and taught him a unique wash technique. I'm sure Pieter will explain a little more about the technique. Thereafter, Pieter spent part of every year studying in India, honing his art. He developed new approaches that even Harish had never attempted. Now he travels and presents workshops in Europe and the US each year when he is not busy painting in the Netherlands or India. He did all illustrations for Awakening the Chakras and contributed to the writing. His art can also be viewed at the Sanatan Society art galleries located physically in Belgium. Now, what Pieter is going to talk about is he'll try to explain with the help of some paintings, and they are stunning, I can tell you, because I've seen some of the examples, how important art and crafts are for yoga. They are a great tool to balance the male and female in us. He will also try to show how following the path of Patanjali is helpful for an artist. Finally, he will explain a little about the importance of making yantras. And after his presentation is over, Pieter will talk a little about how his kind of art and his own travels are spreading the message of Indian culture across various countries in the world. Thank you, Pieter. You can go ahead with your presentation now.
Okay. I think I'm hearable now. First of all, I would like to thank Vijay Lakshmi and also Aparna for inviting me to Namaste 2020. And I would like to greet you and of course all the other members of the panel. It's an honor to be part of this. And
sir, your audio is very low, sir.
The audio is very low.
Yes.
Oh, I have it full. I have it full here. I cannot add more to it.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. Let's see. This is a panel of frozen moments, so it's good to show my paintings in this. They are done in a wash technique, that got originated in the Shanti Niketan of Rabindranath Tagore. And my teachers, Harish Johri and Chandra Bal, developed it to what it is now, and which I'm fully enjoying. So maybe it's time now to show the first photo. That is a painting of Ganesha. And of course, happy Ganesh Chaturthi to you all. This is actually the first deity that I met of the Indian world. And it was a strange experience. Actually, my teacher was telling us all to start with Ganesh Yantra. And I was actually the one that disobeyed. And we were all parked in front of the yoga school, and I was the only one that got a parking ticket. And my teacher had to laugh, of course, when he heard that. And since that time, whenever I need a parking place in Amsterdam, I do a japa for Ganesha. And I have to say, he always helps me. Yeah, next one. Durga. Yeah, that's what I've learned from India. Everything that moves is female. So also the Shiva in the stories that moves is female. Durga is the mother from where everything comes. She is actually Mother Nature, and she's invincible. She's the universal principle of energy, power, and creativity. Her play moves in an orderly and continuous process of creation, preservation, and destruction. I think at the moment she tries to talk to us, so we better listen. Next one. Next one is Surya. Once I asked my teacher, what is the first and most important power in nature? In that time I was a little confused by the discussion about nature. He replied, oh, that's easy. That is Surya, the sun. And it was a hot summer day. Surya is very precise and does not make mistakes. He is perfect. And only in a perfect world we can achieve perfection and self-realization. Since we are also nature, he is inside us. Being in tune with nature was actually the main subject of my guru, which is actually the way of yoga. Getting up before dawn, vegetarian food, meditation, and simple living are the main ingredients. Yeah, next one. Artnarishvara. Most important for our spiritual growth is that male and female in us have to be in balance. And that is beautifully expressed in the image of Artnarishvara. Now, arts and crafts in all its forms play an important role because they activate the two hemispheres in our brain. The male, or the left hemisphere, and the female, or the right hemisphere. The male side is connected to speech, writing, and abstract thinking. It likes patterns and symbols. The female is nonverbal memory, emotions, and concrete thinking. The male is thinking, the female is doing. If we want to have them both active, we have to do something. So it starts with the first line from the female side, and the male side start thinking what to do with it. And they start communicating. Next one. Saraswati. When thinking and doing are focused on one subject, we feel in balance and are happy. All crafts and arts have this. And this is the message of Saraswati, the goddess of education and fine arts. It was and still is the best therapy for human beings. All the old cultures were based on arts and crafts. When working, an artist or craftsman experiences a happiness that cannot be found anywhere else, not on the beach or bar or cinema. It becomes an addiction. While working and being in high concentration, there is no ego. There is no time. Only the artwork exists. The question is, who is painting? The Indian answer is the deities themselves, or the divine in us. And this makes art a great tool for yoga. Next one. Patanjali. The process of making art can be very useful when one is practicing yoga or the eightfold path of Patanjali. A spiritual artist has to be aware of yama and niyama. They are the foundation or the moral code that brings us nearer to our immortal self. They are very important to improve the quality of the art. Next, we need to practice asana to find a posture in which we can work for a long time. With pranayama, we get breathing under control. In pratyahar, we disconnect with the world outside, no more distractions. Then dharana can, or concentration can start, which brings the artist in dhyan or uninterrupted meditation. Samadhi remains gift from God or Guru. Next one. The Shri Yantra. She is representing the female in her most abstract form, like Om. Making yantras, mandalas, or deities makes the divine in us happy. And that experience I have witnessed also in many students that I've been teaching in the last 35 years. In the middle of the mandala, you will see a yantra. Yantras are very simple and most powerful. They are universal because they make use of basic geometric patterns that are common to everybody and every culture. Square, circle, triangle, and point. For making a perfect yantra, it is necessary to have the mind under control. Whenever one is next to the line, thoughts were somewhere else. That makes the yantra a great tool to keep the mind focused, which we need also in our daily life. Next one. Another contribution of yantra is the role of colors that are used to describe the different energies of deities. Like, for example, the red of the Vietri mandala. Red is hot, vitalizing, and connected to our basic instincts. Meditation on red produces the complementary color green, which is cool, refreshing, restful, and it subdues our basic instincts. Using red in wintertime can be very useful, since it produces heat. Blue, a cold color, is very useful in summer. So studying the yantra gives the artist more knowledge and awareness of colors. And now the last one, Krishna. Art is my path up to today, and I'm still fully enjoying it. I'm most grateful to the old culture of India called Sanatan Dharma. It contains so much wisdom. In Sanatan Dharma, there are no others. We are indeed one big family. And I love it when Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you ask from the other gods, I also give you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Pieter. And the colors were stunning. I'm sure everybody enjoyed going through that. So now we come back to the question I had asked you about how you're spreading the message of Indian culture across all the countries that you have been visiting.
Yes, you asked that question already before, and I tried to answer you. Last thing I told you that was actually I'm continuing the work of my teacher. Okay. So he introduced us to chakras, to numerology, tantra, which is yantra and mantra, Ayurveda, numerology, cooking. He was a very good cook. He introduced actually the word Ayurvedic cookbook. So I'm, continuing that work. Mostly by teaching yantra and mandala. But okay, when I'm teaching yantra and mandala, I'm also talking about other things. And I think that is the main contribution of mine.
And you had also talked about spreading of numerology.
Yeah, numerology, by now everybody talks about it. As far as I remember, my teacher was one of the first talking about it. There was also an Englishman. He wrote books about it. And yeah, my teacher was very good in numerology. I was not believing it so much. but okay, started playing with it. And it is really a great tool to understand people. And most important to understand that not everybody is same. Everybody is different. One is slow, one is fast, one is doubting, one is never doubting.
Now, just if I can just ask you a question on, before Harish Johari, what was your life like and what was the kind of work that you used to produce?
Well, when I was a small kid, I used to sketch a lot. I was studying a lot of the Western art. I loved the old masters. I was reading how they were living as a child, how they grew up. And actually, I discovered slowly that that part was closed in the West. Only art academies. I had a school teacher who said to break the power of the crafts, they created art academies. And then with my teacher, when he said to me, I can save you time, then I became his student. Before that, I was studying social science. And actually there I was confronted with the axiom in social science that human being is bad, cannot be trusted and needs to be controlled, which was a little bit depressing. And then when I met my teacher and he started talking human beings are good and can be trusted, I realized that is only a way of looking at it. So that my interest became more towards India.
Very interesting, and thank you so much. We'll be coming back to you a little later with audience questions and some discussion on this. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Aparna has James Godber written.
Sir, he has not joined. Maybe we could go on to Srikumar ji.
Fine. Good evening, Srikumar. Dr. Srikumar Menon, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just to give a background of Dr. Srikumar Menon, it's a very interesting background. Dr. Srikumar M. Menon is an architect specializing in ancient and early architecture of the Indian subcontinent. Srikumar's academic interests focus on ancient architecture, prehistoric monuments, as well as later monuments, such as stupas and temples. He is the author of 2 books, Ancient Stone Riddles, Megaliths of the Indian Subcontinent and Comets, Nomads of the Solar System, both published by Manipal University Press. Presently, he is Associate Professor, School of Humanities, National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bangalore. What's he going to be speaking to us about? Srikumar will talk about how photography has helped him understand architecture better. He avers that he's not a photographer, like a professional photographer, but traveling to various places in India, many of them less known or visited, has helped him get some images of less known structures. He also loves visiting the mountains, and the similarity of the temple shikara to mountains is a well-established fact in Indian temple architecture. He will dwell a bit on how the ancient Indian artisan drew inspiration from natural forms in the landscape and incorporated them into the architectural language. Later on, I'll also be checking with Dr. Menon about he can add some information about spreading of Indian culture through common architecture in other countries across the world. Now, one request, Dr. Menon, is a lot of us are amateurs in the field of architecture. So some of the terminology that you'll be using in your presentation, if you could simplify it for some of us, particularly words like megaliths and all those things, which is, I think a lot of technical terms are there in your profession. And we are looking forward to your presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you, Vijayalakshmi ma'am, for inviting me to this panel discussion. So I'm going to be showing you a lot of images actually, though like sir said, I'm not a professional photographer. So I'll just share my screen and I'll talk as soon as it's going on that way. Just a moment. Are you seeing the screen? Can you see the image on the screen?
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So my journey in this field, actually, I was an architect teaching at a place called Manipal in southern India, in Karnataka. So I was teaching normal architecture, modern architectural design, air conditioning, glazing, all the usual stuff. When I started getting interested in these monuments called the megaliths, because I was involved in a lot of trekking, and megaliths are basically prehistoric structures. That is, prehistory is the period when, roughly before the Common Era, that is, before writing was invented. So megaliths, people had a language, but they did not have a script. So you do not
Sir,
have.
sorry to interfere, but
Yeah,
can you speak a little louder?
Okay, is it? I just put the mic closer. Is that better?
Yes, this is better.
Okay, fine. Thanks.
Thank you.
So megaliths are structures like these. Okay, what you're seeing on screen is actually a monument, probably 3,500 years old. We do not have an exact date for these things. They are prehistoric monument, and this particular one is on a hill near Krishnagiri in Tamil Nadu, a place called Mallasandram. So these look very rough. Now megaliths are found all over the world. It's not an Indian phenomenon at all. It's all over the world. People have been trying to express themselves by building structures, and we think that most of them are most of them are commemorative of funerary structures. So this is commemorating some bygone ancestors. Ancestor worship was very much a part of our early culture, prehistoric culture here. So why I'm showing you this picture is that we have quite conclusive evidence that many of these seemingly humble-looking structures, very roughly made structures, they have contributed to the the flowering of architecture, in the sense that you can find that modern structures like stupas and even temples have evolved from prehistoric architecture, at least on the Indian subcontinent. There's a distinct continuity. I'm not the only one to say it. It has been speculated by people, Ferguson and many other earlier people from maybe 200 years ago. And I just showed this because this is where I started my journey, by looking at megaliths all over, mostly southern India. And while you're looking at these megalithic sites, many of them are, border some of the well-known temples. That, for example, there's a place called Hirebenkal, which looks considerably similar to this. And next to it, south of it is the famous World Heritage Site of Hampi, which all of you must be knowing about. Similarly, this is another place that I went to. I've done a lot of my work in this place at Badami in northern Karnataka, in Bagalkot district. So Badami is a wonderful place. It's important in the development of, in the study of Indian temple architecture, also because it's one of the earliest centers of temple architecture in stone in southern India. So you have from 6th century onward, the Chalukya, the early Chalukyas established, and some of the structures that you see here, like this thing in the this lake is called the Agastya Tirtha. It's an artificial reservoir, and this Bhutanath temple that you see out here was an early Chalukyan structure. You also have the famous cave temples of Badami in this region, and the structural temples. Some of the earliest temples in India you're looking at when you're looking at this image. Okay, so and in the vicinity of Badami, especially in the place called Aihole, you have a lot of temple sharing space, the same location with megalithic monuments, which seem to be intentional. And it looks like the many of the temples are actually continuing the carrying forward rather the commemorative traditions expressed in the megalith, which I told you was a memorial structures and all that. And also, while looking at my prehistoric interests, sometimes you come across scenes like this. This is Hampi, the famous Vittala temple on the banks of Tungabhadra. So I had gone into the hills east of the temple to look for some prehistoric paintings. And when I came back, the sun was setting, and what stared at me was this, something like a painting. The sun was setting, and in this mellow evening light, you could see this, the ruined structures of the Vittala temple and the mantapas in front of it, and the bazaars, everything lit up in that way. And so some of these frozen moments from my field work is what inspired me to take up some of these images so that I can convey a sense of what I have experienced in the field. Now, it's not only temples that or other man-made structures that inspire. This is from the Malaprava Valley, a little bit out of Badami. You have this very interesting sandstone structure. So it just brings to mind that the earliest sculptors who populated the Malaprava Valley were not human. They were the wind and water and all that sculpted the sandstone into really tremendous shapes. And while working there, I have understood that many of the artisans have decided, they've taken inspiration from these wonderful forms that you see all over in the landscape and incorporated those into their temples. I don't know if I can show you all the images that I've planned to, but some of them can actually show this principle, how the artisan incorporated the things that he saw around him and the surrealistic landscape there. This is one example in Hampi where, I find Hampi and Badami as two of the places where the artisans have incorporated landscape very, very deeply into their creations. There's a simple little watchtower, a mantapa, which has been placed somewhere near the Hemkuta hill in Hampi. And you can see that the stone itself has been cut and made into blocks which have been used to put this little watchtower here. Or going to another place in North Karnataka. This is again on the banks of Tungabhadra, a place called Galaganatha, where there is a temple on the shores of, in fact, I'm standing at the temple when I'm taking this picture. And a little bit away from here, there's another temple called at a place called Chaudaya Danapura, where there is an inscription which describes while they're talking about a temple, that it's on the banks of Tungabhadra, which is verily the river of heaven, it says. And I can't help, wondering whether the poet would have actually seen this kind of a scene there, where the water is reflecting the sky into it, and it really looks like the river of heaven here. So sometimes the architecture, the sort of epigraphy, the inscriptions that you see in the temples and the landscape, it kind of gives you a sense of wholeness about what the artisan saw and incorporated into his works. So like it was said in the introduction, I'm fascinated not just by temple, I'm also fascinated by the mountains, and I try to spend at least some part of every year in the Himalaya. So this is a scene from on the way to Kuari Pass, which is in Garhwal, and you can see the valley with the little river flowing prettily at the bottom and stuff like that. And this is from Badrinath last year, where the Narayan Parvat, you can see the moon setting behind the outlines of the Narayan Parvat. Now the interest in mountains is not very removed from my interest in temples, because it's very often, this for example is Dunagiri, again in Gadwal. You see it on the way to Kuari Pass. So Dunagiri is the place where Hanuman is supposed to have taken a part of this mountain which has had the Sanjeevani herb and carried it away. So it is said that the landscape is very much tied up with mythology and all that. And in this region, in the lee of this mountain, there is a village goes by the same name, Dunagiri, and they do not worship Hanuman, because they are a little bit upset with him for disfiguring the mountain, it seems. So when you travel among these, and when you look at the and also the other thing is that this is the Vasudhara Falls near Badrinath, and it is speculated that seeing these waterfalls is where the famous verse in the Skanda Purana, which talks about the Ganga as falling from the big toe of Vishnu, was written after looking at this. So the landscape of the Himalayas inextricably tied up with our mythologies, and it has been sort of well established by various researchers, starting with Stella Kramrisch and many others, that the temple Shikara is modeled very much after the word Shikara means peak, and with the mountain peaks. So if you look at the temple architecture text, some of the types of the designs for temple shapes, because whether it's a stellate, how many points on the star in the stellate plan and things like that, they have been given names which are names of mountains, Meru, Kailasa, Mandara, and all that. It's all so it is kind of sure that people have used the mountain as the Garbhagriha of a temple, the sanctorum of a temple, has been visualized as a cave within a mountain, and that is exactly what you see when you see certain structures. Like, for example, this is the Panchachuli peak, one of the Panchachuli 2, the tallest of the Panchachuli peaks. The Panchachuli peaks are supposed to be the cooking hearths of the Pandavas as they went on the last journey and traveled up to heaven. And so if you look at a peak like this, and this is exactly what a temple Shikara is supposed to symbolize. And for example, if you look at this temple, which is the Galaganatha temple on the banks of Tungabhadra, which I showed you a few slides back. So you can actually imagine this as a model of a mountain. Now, one peculiarity here is that the sides of the temple are curved. You will normally not see, sloping. You will not see this kind of a wall for temples usually. It is speculated that after they constructed the temple, the walls were beginning to buckle, so probably they added on something like a buttress to keep it steady, But this is what comes to my mind when I look at a temple as modeling a mountain. Is one of the very tempting images to show at that particular point of time. But there are also examples like this. This is a Masroor temple in the Kangra Valley in Himachal Pradesh. So if you ever go to Dharamshala and McLeodganj, you can take some time off and travel 20 kilometers and into the Kangra Valley and see this wonderful structure from the 8th century. Not much is known about who patronized it and things like that. But what we know is that this temple was never finished. So this is a crest of a hill. It's a sandstone range which has been cut into a series of shikharas. And when they encountered some faults within the rock, they abandoned it. And of course, much more damage was done in the 1905 earthquake, which struck the Kangra Valley. But still, it remains a wonderful piece of architecture, which is very less known and even lesser visited. So if at all you go to Himachal Pradesh, Masroor is the name in the Kangra Valley. And so this is a kind of temple that we call a rock cut temple. Now, I mean, if you go to Badami, you see a rock cut cave temple, which is basically an excavation into the rock, and the sanctum is created within the bowels of the rock, so to speak. But this is a different kind of a thing which I will dwell on in this presentation, where the outside of the rock itself is chiseled to become a temple. I mean, it's not built by putting blocks one on top of the other. Rather, the entire hillside itself is carved into the temple, including the sanctum which is scooped out of it. So this is not. There are very few examples in like this. Maybe you could count maybe 25 temples like this on various scales in different parts of India. I'll show you a few of them which are familiar to you, and some which are not so familiar probably. This is in Mahabalipuram. I'm sure all of you have seen the famous rathas of Mahabalipuram, and though you would be visiting the Pancha Pandava rathas near the beach, and maybe the Ganesh ratha near the Sri Krishna's butter ball, but if you go a little bit away in the same complex as the Sri Krishna's butter ball, you see near the Pidari Amman temple, you find these two temples, the unfinished temples. In fact, when I first went there, this picture is from my first visit to this place, and it was like you can see it is a evening twilight, and to me it felt as if the workers had just laid down the chisels and retired for the evening. It looked so freshly, and it is wonderful to see the form of some of the earliest temple forms of this kind, of the Dravida Shaili that you see in India, in southern India, emerging out of the parent rock. So apart from the Pidariam and Ratha, there's also one called the Valyankute Ratha, which is here. Here again, you can see how the temple is just, we don't know why they abandoned it and why it was not completed. But I think these these three temples rather, give you an example of how the artisan actually went about carrying out his trade, plying his trade. This is another example which very few people would have seen. It's in a place called Thal, which is north of Almora, very close to this, to the main Himalayan range. And this is again, probably I would give a date of around 10th century for this, 10th century AD for this temple. You can see it is carved out of this rock. The remainder of the rock is remaining here. The entire thing has been carved out of one piece of, out of the same parent rock. In fact, the sculptor has gone a little bit beyond that. He has carved a little channel here, which channels rainwater into this. And when in the rainy season, I can imagine that there would be twin waterfalls cascading down in front of this the temple. It's a wonderful creation, very small. In fact, this height from here to here, you would have to stoop to get into it. It's only about 1 meter. But it's a brilliant little masterpiece, and I think it must have been a sculptor from the Pratihara period, somewhere in the 10th century, who had carved this. Pratihara architecture had a deep influence in the architecture in Kumaon, the stone architecture in Kumaon. So this is probably one of the earliest examples of this particular kind of temple model coming into the Kumaon region. Now, this preoccupation with mountains and temples has other advantages. One moment. Before that, I'll just show you another example. This is from Hampi. As I was telling you, I think the Vijayanagara artisans were, the real masters when it came to incorporating landscape into the creations. Like in architecture, we always say that the best architectural creation is that which responds to sight. And I cannot think of any better way than there's only one example. If you look all over the place, you would find that the natural boulders which exist on the site like these, very often they carve the deity on this. And in fact, this is a subsidiary shrine for this. The main temple goes on to the right, which also the deity Vishnu with his consorts are standing in a standing position, have been carved on the rock. So basically, they've carved the deities on few rocks in the region, and they've built a temple around it. And it's a marvelous example. I'm sure if you visit Hampi, you will see many more examples of this. The famous Malyavanta Raghunatha temple itself is an example of this kind of construction. But I chose this image because it kind of shows the way they went about fixing the beams onto the rocks and things like that. Now, as I was telling you, this preoccupation with mountains and their imagery as they come into the into architecture and sculpture is very useful at times. If ever you've been in the mountains and watched the sun come up, there would be these rays of light which are shooting out from behind the ridges, till literally the sun would burst over the ridge and flood the valley with light. And you can see these rays which are coming out. This is a good way of looking at the imagery of Surya. The previous speaker also mentioned that, the image of Surya. This is an image this is a ceiling image, a sculpture which is there in the Virupaksha temple at Pattadakallu, again near Badam, in the Badami Aihole Pattadakallu series in the Malaprabha Valley. And this has been carved in the 8th century by a sculptor. We have the name of the sculptor because he has written it in one of the inscriptions there, called Devaputran. So what he has done, it's a marvelous image. So you can see the Surya holding the 2 lotus flowers in his hands and sitting on his chariot. You can see 3 horses here, 1 in the center and 3 on the other side. There are clouds shown here. And these are the 2 heralds of dawn, Usha and Pratyusha, who are shooting arrows on either side. Now it's exactly what you see out here. The arrows, the heralds of dawn, before the sun, the chariot of the sun comes, rushing over the ridge here. That's exactly the same thing that they've been showing. So the Indian artisan, the early artisan, was very, observant about what he sees in nature. And many of these concepts have been, abstract concepts have been given concrete shape into these, into this imagery. You can even see a couple of makaras behind him, and it is a wonderful image. Fortunately, in very good condition. The ceiling of the Mantapa at the Virupaksha temple, Pattadakallu. And while talking about the powers of observation of the Indian sculptor, I would like to end with an image from the 3rd century BC. This is at a Buddhist stupa at a place called Kanaganahalli, again in northern Karnataka, near a village called Sannati. And it's a wonderful stupa. It is probably the archaeological discovery of last century because it is built in the Amravati style. I mean, the sculptors are probably from the Amravati school who have done this. And you can see this wonderful image of an elephant. And I think I've been following images of elephants in various temples, from the earliest ones on to comparatively later times like the Hoysala ones and all that. I think this is one of the most, intimate study of the anatomy of an elephant. Every hollow, every wrinkle that you normally associate around the eyes and the temples, and it's been very faithfully reproduced. And all that in a relief of about half an inch to 1 inch. These are all done in shallow relief. And if you look at the sculptures of Kanaganahalli, which again is not very much on the tourist map, but it can be very well visited, it's open to the public. If you go there, you will see that many of these, there are depictions of elephants with musk flowing from its temples, and even the final stage of musk when it drops down from the gland near the temple and goes into the mouth. It shows a wonderful observation of the animal, and not only elephant. There are many other depictions. You even have depictions of Bactrian camel, which shows that some of the artisans may not have been from South India. They would have come from in the northwest, maybe even from Gandhara region. So you can see when you look at all these things in different parts of the country, you start getting some kind of an idea about how the architecture and sculpture evolved in the place. I think I'll end with that, and if there's any questions, I would be happy to take them.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Menon, and we'll be coming back to you later with all the questions. And I think there's already one question that has come for you. And you are being pretty modest about your photography. I think you're a very professional photographer. I think everybody has been impressed by the photographs that you've shown. So we'll be coming back to you a little later on this.
Thank you.
And I'm glad to inform you that we have Mr. James Godber now in our midst. As you know, he's slated to speak about photography, particularly of the natural environment. Mr. Godber, you're there?
Hello, good evening, and happy Ganesha Chaturthi to all of you. I hope you can hear and see me.
Yes, very clear, and thank you very much. I'll just give a brief about Mr. James Godber. James Godber is a diplomat currently working at the British Deputy High Commission in Bengaluru. Having read environmental economics at the University of York, UK, he initially entered the UK civil service in the Department for Environment, working on energy and climate policies. He has since made a career in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, serving in China and Qatar as well as in London, before coming to India in 2017. Travel has enabled him to develop his photography, and is thrilled to have had the opportunity to experience India's natural environments as well as the culture and cities. Mr. Godber also had an interesting experience a few weeks back when, I think, driving back to Bangalore via Bandipur. His vehicle had a flat tire and he was stranded in Tiger country. I'm sure he'll elaborate a little more about his experience there. And after your presentation, Mr. Godber, we'd like to hear you speak a little more on that the British Council in India has been promoting or supporting actively Indian art and craft. And there's a particular scheme that is there called Crafting Futures. If you could elaborate a little more on that program, where it actually encourages artisans in India and NGOs, people working within the craft sector in both India and the UK. There's a collaboration that is there. So while you're speaking, could also reveal to us a little bit about the kind of equipment that you use, what is the patience that you require when shooting wildlife, and the other environmentally most interesting part of your hobby. Thank you. Please go ahead, Mr. Godber.
Thank you so much, Shri Narayan, for that kind introduction. And I'm ever so sorry to you and to everybody involved this evening that I wasn't at 7 o'clock. Yes, I'm not sure, this isn't going to be a polished presentation, largely because I didn't realize until approximately 6:45 that I was making a presentation rather than participating in a panel discussion. So naive on my part, foolish, some may say. So I've spent the last hour scrabbling around, trawling through about 80,000 images to try and find some that I'd be happy to share with you at almost no notice and to talk about. So this is not considered. I had, as I say, anticipated that we were going to have a conversation about where wildlife fitted in terms of influencing people's perspectives of India. And that's obviously a mistake of mine. So apologies to all of you. Now I need to work out how to share my screen. I guess I just click there. And then I'm going to start here, I suppose. Sharing is paused, bring your shared window to the front. Can you see the cat, everybody?
No, we can't see.
Okay. Let's see. I've clicked resume share. While hopefully the computer does something, in my anticipation for the conversation, I was thinking about the sorts of figures that were exciting and interesting about India and wildlife and India's biodiversity. So India has 2.4% of the world's total land area, but 8% of all the recorded species. So if we're thinking about how wildlife in India is powerful, then you know, India obviously has an awful lot of assets to show and to share with the world. I'm still not sharing with you, I don't think, am I? Am I sharing now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, I shall kill that, and hopefully then you can see one of your 3,000 beautiful tigers heading into the Kabini thickets to the side of the path. fleeting sighting, my first sighting of a tiger in Karnataka, just crossing the road and moving straight away. It's definitely not a stellar photo, but the first one that I took after moving here to Bengaluru in the States. And in fact, later this evening, I'm taking my wife and my children to the airport because we're all going to spend some time in the next few weeks back in the UK, but they are heading home this evening. And next week, whilst they are back in the UK on quarantine, I shall spend a few days back in Kabini hoping for similar sightings to this one. So wildlife, though, isn't just the wildlife. Oh, it stopped again. How frustrating. This is the problem when you didn't get time to put it together into a PPT. Isn't the wildlife that is in national parks. There is amazing wildlife on our doorsteps. And this photograph, if I can get it to come to you, is one that I took from my balcony. Why? I keep clicking resume share. Does anybody have more expertise in this than me?
Do you want to just email your pictures to one of us?
I can share the Dropbox that they're in with you, by all means.
Okay, please do that, and then we'll just share it from there then.
Okay, let's work out how I do that. Do that on my phone, that will be quickest and easiest. Aha, I think I've worked out how to do a sunset image, a silhouette sunset image of an extraordinarily common bird in this city, but one that for me, as somebody living out of the country, is still exciting. You don't have to travel far in order to see wildlife in experience nature. Indeed, the next image that I want to show you is also taken from my from the same balcony of a red-cheeked bulbul. Again, a relatively common bird. This is painful. I'm so sorry, everybody. Relatively common bird, but still beautiful when you capture them at the right time in the right way. So let's there we are. So again, I didn't have to leave or walk anywhere at all. I'm sat at my dining room table to talk to you right now, and I could have taken this photograph from this location with the windows open, the red-cheeked bulbul feeding on the berries of the plant that drapes over the side of my balcony. And for me, as a naturalist, an environmentalist in the UK, I guess what's so exciting is what you see when you you heard that I studied environmental economics, and I've always been passionate about the natural world, but I used to visit parks and rarely see anything because I used to charge around, rush from place to place. in ever such a hurry. And as I've got older, I've really enjoyed the fact that my photography, in combination with the passion for the natural world, has allowed me to sit and see more. And again, one of the questions I was asked was to talk about the patience that you exhibit in order to take a photograph, any kind of photograph of wildlife. The tiger that I showed, first of all, I've been on not very many by local standards, but probably 10 safaris in Kabini National Park in Nagahole. I have seen one tiger, sighting lasting 2 minutes, total time invested 5 full days of my life. So the reward is fantastic when you get that. When you get the opportunity, you really have to make the most of it, and you invest knowing that you're going to have time listening to birdsong, observing other things, and not necessarily always getting the image that you hope might grace somebody else's screen somewhere else. Let me see if I can find a faster way of sharing. I think I'm getting the hang of this. While we talk about the 3,000 tigers having recently had International Day of the Tiger, let's share another image. It keeps coming back to the same thing. This is not how it's supposed to work, guys. From Ranthambore National Park, where I've had much more success in finding tigers. But to do that, I had to go in June, endure the 45-degree heat, and in a week I was lucky enough to see more than a dozen cats. I've got no idea, it keeps coming back to the same place. This is so
Maybe
embarrassing.
you could just go on as a talk, James. We could share the pictures later too.
Yeah, I think that may be better, James.
Okay.
And tell us something about some exciting moments in your session when you went for photography, wildlife, environment.
Here in India, I came with a 6-month-old little girl when I moved to your country, and I've since had a little boy. So my opportunities to get out have actually been few and far between. I am stay-at-home dad most of the time when I'm not committed to being in other places for work. But I'm lucky enough to have spent time in Kabini, to have travelled in Kerala, to have visited Tamil Nadu, to have been to Ranthambore for the park, and to Bharatpur up in the north to find and observe the bird parks there, and have thoroughly enjoyed all of the natural beauty that India has. And I think as I was thinking about what I would share, realizing I was going to be asked to share images rather than just to talk with you, skimming through them, I was struck that the title Frozen Moments appealed to me as much about capturing something innovative on the street as it did in the natural world. So I feel that my life here and my experiences in India are a real blend of the enjoyment of nature and the travel and the opportunities there, but also the exploration of the cities and the participation of the people. And so I was obviously reminded, because of today being Ganesha Chaturthi, of last year when I was down on Ulso Lake with the crowds, watching some of the large Ganesha icons being subsumed into the lake there, and remembering the photographic opportunities that come with that. And I think for me, India is extraordinarily blessed with richness in abundance in terms of the people and the culture and the nature. My sort of preparation reminded me of a statement that Mr. Modi had made, saying, conservation is intrinsic to Indian values. In India, faith and nature have had a deep link since ancient times. And I know that some of what's happened in the last years, you know, some of the legislation, people are accusing the government of diluting environmental protection laws, but there is amazing progress being made at the same time in terms of conservation of the flagship species. India, as I say, has 3,000 tigers. It has 50% of the world's elephants. That makes this country an extraordinarily attractive place for people who live elsewhere to want to come and visit and experience. And every state has so many parks and places to go. You mentioned, Mr. Narayan, the experience I had when supporting an evacuation flight of British nationals from Kerala a few months ago at the beginning of the COVID crisis. And we chose to drive down the Western Ghats to Calicut first, and then down to Kochi. And unfortunately, I was driving at the moment that I saw this little triangular stone as we moved into Bandipur Park, but I was driving the Deputy High Commissioner, and he and I were both sort of looking left and right to see if there was anything more interesting to see. Touched this stone and then ended up spending an hour and a half there loading everything out of the boot and changing the tire. But yes, I feel very, very blessed to be here, and it's big and small for me that is attractive. When you go slow, you see the spiders, you see the colors and the contrasts of the animals on the amazing flora that we have in the country. You see the dragonflies zipping about in huge abundance. So whilst the population of the country continues to grow and the pressure, urban and rural, you know, that tension is really there. There are such amazing treasures here to be protected. And I'm sorry that I've rather let myself and you down by not having this all together in a means that I can share with you, but I promise that I will follow up later this evening so that we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Would you like to throw some light about the British Council promoting the Indian craftsmen?
Sorry to interrupt, but James, can you just stop sharing your screen so we can see you?
Yeah, I think that's okay now. We can't hear you now.
You can see me.
Okay, now we can.
Excellent. Excellent.
Would like to say a few words about the promoting craftsmen in India.
So Crafting Futures is not a program that I'm familiar with. As you perhaps know, the UK has 18 or 19 different Whitehall departments present in India. India has the UK's largest diplomatic footprint. And my day-to-day role and remit is to build science partnerships. Right. Crafting Futures could be a British Council initiative, or it could be an initiative of the Department for International Development, which by this time next week will be joined with my department, the Foreign Ministry, in a new ministry. We will, from the 1st of September, we will be known as the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, bringing that together. But we do a great deal of work around the world to support communities, community craft, community tradition, and help preserve tradition. And I think that's one of the things that we think as a country and a nation is really important, that where we are carrying out activity, it is respectful of what is happening in that country and allows people to preserve the things that are important to them.
Okay, thank you very much. It was lovely hearing you speak. Now, I think we have completed the presentations by the 4 speakers. What we'll do before we go to the audience questions, Srimati Vijayalakshmi, Jayakumar, do you have any specific questions to any of the panelists? Or do panelists have any questions to ask other panelists?
Well, I would like to ask one question of all of them. The reason why we called it frozen moment was that even though it looks like it's a frozen moment, every one of these has a story to tell. So I would like to know from any one of them what the frozen moment indicated to them and whether there is a story behind any one of the pictures that they show.
Well, for me, it's very difficult to answer because every painting is nothing but a story. India loves stories. And that is something I understood of the Indian stories. It's a very simple way to transmit the highest and most complicated philosophy. So in that way, stories are very important actually to educate the people. So that is what I'm also thinking here. People should go back to the church. At least they hear some good stories that make sense. But that is the importance. It is also important of India that they respect their ancestors. So they can still listen to the old stories. That is knowledge that has been accumulated by our ancestors and transmitted through all kinds of things, sculptures and music and paintings.
Thank you, sir. What about you, Srikumar Menon?
Yeah, it's easier for me to answer, I guess, because architecture is famously referred to as frozen music. So what you see, but in spite of that, all the monuments undergo change over time due to the due to the action of the elements and even modifications. What you see as a Vittala temple in Hampi was not the same, and it started as a small shrine and things have been added to it, kind of thing. So I think when we and the perspective also matters. Like when you see it in a particular light, the angle from which you take an image also kind of freezes that particular moment in time, and the state of the monument, some of the aspects bring out what the artisan intended. Because if you can get certain images that actually bring out the story behind it. For example, you find a lot of these artisan marks in many of the temples. It actually shows on how they went about doing this, and there'll be. Take any monument, there will be certain aspects of it which are unfinished, certain sketches which have not been carved into sculptures. So the angle from which you photograph actually brings out these little stories which are like little snapshots in time. So that would be the way I would. You're actually seeing into the mind of an artisan who lived 1,000 years before you or something like that. I hope that answered.
What about you, Christian de Vitre?
Sure. I love what you said, Srikumar, about this quote that I've heard before too, about the architecture is frozen music. It's very beautiful and very evocative. And so for me, it's interesting in terms of sculpture too, because it's inherently static. Sculpture is inherently still. And so the challenge for me in representing this siddha, who's integrated his state of realization into the world to such a degree that he's really become the laws of nature. Part of the challenge to represent that was to integrate that dynamism within the stillness of the medium of sculpture. So that was the challenge, and also the interesting part of trying to evoke the nature of this siddha. To have both the element of stillness and dynamism at the same time.
So what about you, James?
I don't want to anthropomorphize the wildlife photography that I do, but I do think that the title Frozen Moments is apposite, because for me at least, as we've already touched on, the time I spend in the wilds is the contrast to the time that we spend in the hustle and bustle of the city.
I think you're had a problem with the network.
He's freezing in the moment.
It started to rain here. It's raining very heavily, so perhaps
Okay.
Is it working now, James?
I can try again. I was saying that it is the opportunity to spend time in the wilds that allows us to slow down, which is then a contrast to the time in the urban environment where we have all of the hustle and bustle. And the act of slowing down for me is quite apposite as a title for frozen moments, relative at least to life that we experience day to day when we are in the urban environment.
So yes, sir. Narayan, sir, if you had anything to ask.
Okay, one final question to each of the panelists, short one. If we meet again 1 year later and have a presentation like this, what is new that you will be presenting to us? Something new that you would have taken, which you would have started now as a project, and in 1 year you would have finished it. Pieter?
Oh, that is very difficult to predict, but I have a wish to finish the Ganga book. I made once with my teacher 50 paintings about the life of Ganga.
Okay.
But okay, that will take more than a year to update them, to bring them to a higher level.
Okay. And when is the next trip to India?
My next trip to India, that depends on the corona. Otherwise it will be in January, February.
Okay, right.
Like to escape the winter here and enjoy the winter there in India.
Okay. Christian, anything to add for that, for you, your project in 1 year's
Well,
time?
I hope in a year to come, I will have had the opportunity to visit India again. That would be my wish. I have many other, projects and sculptures that I'm working on, but I'd love to be able to make it to India again.
Okay. And Srikumar?
Yeah, actually this current pandemic has affected me very badly. Like you can see from the pictures I showed you, a large part of the year is spent traveling for me. So that has been affected. Fortunately, the amount of data that I've collected from the field. So currently I'm engaged in writing another book it's called Monuments of Stone and Landscapes of Memory, which is basically trying to understand these monuments as a sort of continuum from the prehistoric time to later time.
Okay.
Building on all the things that I've got so far. Hopefully that will reach some kind of conclusion by 1 year. Thank you.
James?
If we were to talk again this time next year, I would love to be able to show you a little more of my wildlife photography. But in terms of the project that I think I would like to undertake in the next 12 months, if I had the time, I would dearly love to do something with the camera around the city, trying to capture the difference that COVID is making to people's lives. Here in Bengaluru, there's been some amazing art spring up on street corners, close to the town hall, of people, paintings of people wearing masks and so on, and capturing some of the art with the movement of the people, I think would be a really fun project to try and engage in.
Right. Thank you so much. I think I throw the floor open to the audience. I think already a couple of questions are there. Anjan Nandi, I think it is addressed to Srikumar. Can you explain how modern architecture built form can be inspired from this natural forms?
I think I answered that question on this one. I'll just repeat what I said. I think a lot depends on the scale. Understanding is, if you look at the works of master architects, you find that they respond very much to the site. So one thing is that we find, like for instance, if you have increasingly, especially in Kerala where I come from, and in many other hill stations also, I find that if you're building on a sloping site, the tendency is to level the slope, create a flat place, and build whatever you want. But I think making a strong decision on not to modify, to preserve the character of the site, and then molding your building to fit the site. I think if you do that, I think that is the best response that you can have for any building, not just monuments or anything.
I think there's one more question for you. It's from Ramakrishnan Sitaraman. Most of the monuments, whether prehistoric or historic, seem to be neglected and unkempt. Is my impression correct, accurate? So what are the actual constraints on the ground that lead to this situation?
Yeah, that I would say that we have a huge amount of built heritage, which is a good thing. But unfortunately, the model of conservation that we have adopted seems to consist of either the state archaeology, either the state archaeology department or the ASI, the Archaeological Survey of India. They should take care of it. So all the sites which enjoy protection under these, they are more or less fine. Okay, you can find fault with some of the policies of ASI, but I think overall they are preserved pretty well. But there's a huge amount of monuments, which are not protected, like the megaliths. Most of the prehistoric sites are not protected. So you find that, I mean, today there's a person who works on the inscription stones within Bangalore city. He had contacted me about a megalithic site called Managondanahalli, which is in Bangalore, which has been completely, all the megaliths have been removed in the last few years, either as building material or for leveling the site or things like that. So we are losing a lot of megaliths due to this model of protection that we are following. Unless the local inhabitant itself start protecting a site, I think we don't have much hope of protecting all the rich variety of rich heritage that we have.
Okay. I think that this is the final question that has come. It is addressed to James from Mandua, Nehant. James, I always wanted to know how to handle a situation when we don't get fine lighting while in wildlife, how to take great photos in bad lighting.
Okay, so options, I suppose, it depends on the species that you're photographing and how quickly it's likely to move. But if it's megafauna, then they tend not to move super fast all of the time. So in bad lighting, you might go down to a very slow shutter speed and pan with the animal in order to blur the background and potentially blur the animal, and that can create some interesting effects. The other things that you can do in post-processing, you can definitely make, even in flat light, an image more punchy, which is a skill worth investigating if it's not something that you can do already. And then, of course, the third thing is be patient, return to the same place again tomorrow, because tomorrow is another day and the sun comes up.
Okay. Thank you so much to all our four panelists, and the audience has been fascinated by the over 90 minutes of discussion and presentations made by these distinguished guests. And I'm sure all of you will agree that each one in their own right have brought in certain expertise to their field, which is from any standard would be referred to as world standard. And all of them, without fail, have a connection with India. And all of them have shown interest in what is part of India, what we think is part of India from ancient times, some of the philosophies, some of the beliefs that we have. And it's nice to know that even these panelists actually believe all those things and had belief in all those things and wanted to convert them into art, whether it's photography, whether it's painting, whether it's sculpture, whether it's architecture. Each one of the panelists have really transformed art to describe something which is very fascinating, which is very Indian, and it also shows the kind of love that they have for our country. Thank you all so much for spending your time with us. I know, James, that you're in a hurry for your families pending travel. And I think Pieter, Christian, Srikumar, each one of you have put in a lot of hard work and to make the program for us very interesting, and I'm sure all the audience really enjoyed it. And now, Mr. Jayakumar, would you like to give any final?
Thank you, sir. I'll just say a few words.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Narayan, sir. It was really, really wonderful the way you've put together the session at such short notice, and your sensitivity to the inspirations of our wonderful artists here. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you to all our beloved artists who've dedicated not just this 1.5 hours, but their entire artistic and creative lives, several hours in education, in dedication to their gurus, in dedication to our shastras. Thank you so much for sharing your art and your wisdom with us. We will continue this journey into the exploration of art through our morning session tomorrow, which is called The Colors of Sri Rama. And we will have Srimati Vishaka Hari, a very renowned Harikatha exponent with us. And she will talk about Sri Rama as an international hero and protagonist, and how his values have, and the path and the decisions and his values, how they resonate with everyone in the world. It will be followed by a very unique Ramanama session where we chant the name of Sri Rama in the different ragas of South Indian Carnatic music. This is something a little different, where we don't just repeat the name of the Lord, but we say it in the different colors of the different notes of the South Indian music tradition. It is going to be conducted by Dr. Vijaya, who's done a 12-hour non-stop Ramanama Khandam. She, along with her students from Coimbatore, have done from morning 6 o'clock to evening 6 o'clock, have chanted the name of the Lord non-stop in the different ragas. So she will be sharing her experience and will be guiding us through that session. It will be followed by another short session by a child artist who began narrating tales of Sri Rama at the age of 7. And she combines music as well as quotes from the Ramayana. So tomorrow she's recorded a session for us. That is Varsha from Chennai. We'll be having a theater session, Nataka, with Prakash Belwadi, a very renowned actor from Bangalore. His latest film is there for all of us to see. It's about one of India's very famous mathematicians, Shakuntala. And he will be talking about he will help us understand some of the conflicting notions about the main characters in the Ramayana. So do join us for these 2 morning sessions. We will also have, we will have a short video clip by none other than Rukmini Jayakumar, the daughter of our director, better known as one of the more nuanced and sensitive Bharatnatyam artists of India, also an actress. And we would like to end this session with a video which she directed, choreographed, and conceptualized for International Yoga Day, where she very beautifully brings out the power of the female divine Shakti through yoga and through Indian dance, through Bharatnatyam.
Yeah,
Please, could you play the video?
Just 1 minute. During the chanting of the Ram Nama, we are going to have, we've sent out sketches of different aspects of the Ramayana to all the people who have registered, and they'll be coloring it. So when we say colors of Rama, we are looking at every aspect of life. The auditory, the visual, and each person coloring it themselves. And these art sketches are also in 3 different styles of Indian art. So all that has been sent out to those who have registered for the session. So now we can watch the video that I must say that Center for Soft Powers video was released on World Yoga Day, and we've reached 1 million views yesterday. So we'll just play that for you now.
विग्रहं त्रिनयनं माणिक्यमौली स्फुरत् तारानायकशेखरां स्मितमुखीमां मीनवक्षोरुहाम् पाणिभ्यामलिपूर्णरत्नचषकं रक्तोत्पलं सौम्यां रत्नघटस्थरक्तचरणां ध्यायेत् परां ज्वर विषमज्वर ग्रह नक्षत्र दोषाञ्चान्या हर हर काली सर सर गौरी गम गम विद्ये आले माले काले बन्धे भज भज विद्ये मख मख विद्ये नाशय नाशय पापम् हर हर दुःस्वप्नं विध्वंसय विध्वंसय विघ्न विनाशिनि रजनी सन्ध्ये मुन्दु भिनादे मानस्तोषे मानसवेगे शङ्खिनी चक्रिणी वज्रिणी गदिनी शूलिनी अपमृत्यु विनाशिनी विश्वेश्वरी द्राविडी केशवदयिते पशुपति सहिते भीममर्दिनि गमनी दामिनी शबरी किराती वाचक्री ॐ द्रं 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 गुरु गुरु ॐ द्रं गुरु गुरु
Thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful session. And on this auspicious day of Ganesh Chaturthi, we pray that we are guided by his wisdom and his strength, and it gives us the power to deal with these difficult times. And thank you once again for joining us on this day. Good night.
Thank you. Right.
Namaste.